Well, welcome to the podcast. Super excited to have this conversation about something I've actually never spoken to someone about before, which
Cool.
is our inner teenager.
Inner
Welcome.
change. Thank you. Thanks so much for having me. It's a pleasure.
I'd just love to know a little bit about your background, what it is that you do, and how you got to this space of really helping people the way you do.
Thank you. Thank you. In a nutshell, I teach people how to fall madly, deeply, and wholeheartedly in love with themselves.
Oh, what a
Not
terrible job. What a
terrible job.
terrible job.
Help people overcome the mindset
Mm.
because self-love is a skill. And I don't think many people realize that. I don't think many people understand that it is something that you can cultivate. It is a skill that you can acquire. And with practice, you'll get better at it. The only reason why you don't like yourself, the only reason why there's so much self-hate is because you have an uncontrolled mind with beliefs and thought patterns that are held in a space of fear and doubt, very often from your childhood. You know, between the ages of 0 and 7, most of our beliefs are established.
Yep.
And none of us, not none of us, very few people do a bit of a stock take in their adulthood to go, which ones are serving me, which ones are not.
Mm.
So I help people unravel those core beliefs from childhood, as well as beliefs that they've collected beyond that time as well,
Mm.
so that they can free themselves from their mind that tells them that they're not good enough and cultivate the skill of self love. If you've practiced self hate for 10, 15, 25, 65 years, you can start practicing a new skill and you'll get better at it because practice makes progress, not perfection.
I love that you talk about self-love as a skill. I've never thought about it as a skill before. I almost feel now that you've said that, I'm internalizing it as I think I felt a lot of shame around maybe not loving myself, like it's something that I should innately do.
Yeah,
For you to say no, it's a skill, I almost feel so much space and freedom in that.
fabulous. And I hope that all your listeners do as well, because how can you learn something? How can you know something that you've never been taught? You know,
Yeah, well, here's my conflict with it. In my background as a teacher of little people, so a kindergarten teacher,
uh-huh.
I knew the psychology behind our programming, and I think having spent 20 years with these little people day in day out,
Hmm.
I saw so intimately how loving themselves was innate.
Yeah.
And so maybe that's where I've actually programmed myself to think, is there something intrinsically
Mm,
misplaced within you that as an adult, you don't have that?
yeah. Can I speak to that?
Please.
Yeah, yeah, and I mean, thank you for sharing because that shame that we can feel, I should be loving myself.
Mm.
You know, and you're right, little kids do. And to hear me saying that self-love is a skill, little kids automatically know how to do it. How do we not know how to do it as adults then? Like something bad has happened. Generally, I will speak to the idea that you are inherently worthy, you're inherently enough. And when I ask, especially live audiences, but any audiences that I might be speaking in front of, I will ask about children. Cool. And I'm going to ask you, I'm just going to do this live. Is this cool if I do this live with
Yeah,
you?
absolutely.
So, Kirsten, when you have looked after little people, is there any child who is born unworthy?
No,
Okay. So, any child in the world, is there any child in the world that's born unworthy?
absolutely not.
Not born enough?
Absolutely not.
Okay. At what point do they grow out of that?
I would say when I started my career,
Hmm.
teenage years, but now I'm seeing it more preteen.
Hmm.
And even
And
my
I'm going to pause you there. Did they actually grow out of it? Did they
no,
grow out of being worthy, or
you're
were
right.
they? What
They
happened?
they were conditioned out of being worthy. And younger and younger these days, my 6-year-old niece the other day said to me that she was called a name by her brother.
Hmm.
And it was just a dagger to my heart because I saw there's the first moment
Mm.
where you're being conditioned out of that.
And you're never conditioned out of it. Let's make it
Oh,
really clear here.
okay.
The worth is inherent. The worth never changed. The worth and the value never changes. It's as though there is a filter that is layered over the top of that. That's the conditioning. We've been conditioned, our thoughts and our beliefs have been conditioned, but the worth still is there. It never changes. It never goes away. We just believe. Our beliefs get put as a layer on top of that. So if you look at your 6-year-old niece, she's
Mm.
now starting to believe. Actually, if we go the other way, she's starting to lose faith in her worthiness. But her worthiness is always there. It's never gone away. It's just the conditioning gets put on top of. So when I say that self-love is a skill, because babies come in into earth with such innocence,
Mm.
everything gets put on top of us is a layer of conditioning. And so the skill is about unraveling the layers and unlayering the conditioning so that the truth can be revealed. And
Yeah.
yeah,
And
that's where I would lay with that.
I think that as adult, especially adult women, we can have such a depth of space and tenderness and compassion
Mm,
for children and maybe even our inner child. What I've never looked at and considered was my inner teenager.
yes.
And that's what I'd love to talk to you about because I'm not sure I hold the same depth of tenderness for her
Mm,
as I do, say, my 6-year-old self when I've done inner child work.
yeah.
To talk to us about what happens to us. So we're these children, and then we get these layers, these filters put upon us.
Mm.
But then we hit adolescence. What physically and then psychologically happens to us in adolescence?
Yeah, look, I mean, obviously our body goes through a change in a way that it hasn't in childhood. You know, actually, I'm going to speak to that for a moment. The whole process of getting to adulthood, from a physical perspective, we are changing year on year on year on
Mm.
year. Every single year, like from 5 to 6, you have grown bigger. Like your clothes don't fit constantly when you're a child, right? Like your shoes are going up a size. You're
So, same
constantly
as same as when you're an adult too.
sometimes, right? Sometimes don't have that level of stability in our body, right? That year on year, and people are telling you how grown up you are and how big you are and how oh my God, you've gotten so big. And people tell you this your whole childhood and adolescence because there's all these very significant markers happening in a very short period of time.
Mm.
When adolescence comes, it's a really interesting era for humans because the word teenager didn't exist a few hundred years ago. Once we hit, like it's an age category that is relatively new to humans. It's not to say that we had never experienced it, but when we started menstruating or we hit puberty, we became adults in
Yeah, wow.
times gone by. We went from child to adult who would go through a rite of passage. You would have an initiation when you got your first period, or for men, I presume, when they started getting pubic hair, that would then be the thing that you now are getting initiated into adulthood. You now become a woman or you now become a man. We are now teenagers. And so we have this space between childhood and adulthood where kindly we get to grow up a little bit more. We don't have to, have all the responsibility, but we're not a child anymore either.
Mm.
And, by the time I was my years, like if I go to year 7, give you a bit of background, I hated myself. So the reason I do what I do now is because I hated myself. I didn't like my body at all. I have been on countless numbers of diets thinking that I just need to get skinny in order to get my worth back or my worth at all, and led me to an eating disorder. But by the time I was 12, so entering high school, if you talk about teenagehood, I was 5'8" and had C cup breasts.
Yeah, wow. Adult.
I looked like a woman,
Yeah.
like wholeheartedly. I was confused for teachers on that first day of school. Miss, miss, miss. I'm like, no, I'm lost too. I don't know what I'm doing.
Wow.
And wherever I'd go in the world, I was also a very mature child. I was the youngest of 5. Not to say that that would make me mature, but I happen to be
Mm,
well articulate even at that age. And I was often sprung into adulthood,
mm.
sexualized at a very young age. That's happening now, even
Oh,
like
yeah.
more so than it was how long, like 30 years ago when I was
Mm,
10, 12. So I think that to answer your question about what happens, the changes, even hormonally, are wildly confusing because in days gone by, we were now an adult, but we're not yet an adult yet. You know, the Britney Spears songs come to mind, like, I'm
yeah.
not a girl, not
Yeah.
yet a woman. You
Yeah.
know, like we're not a girl, we're not a woman. We're almost in this limbo finding ourselves stage. And because every other kid is doing that, every other kid is
Sorry.
just figuring that out. Every other kid is figuring it out. And no one has the emotional education. No, not very few
Mm.
people have the mental education and the emotional education to deal with our thoughts and feelings. And when we don't know how to deal with our thoughts and feelings, it just becomes chaos.
So in that time, because I think people can consider their childhood traumatic, but I think that upon reflection, now that I'm thinking about it, because of these reasons, because of our conscious awareness, because of the hormonal changes in our body, because we are seeking that belonging outside of that maybe family unit, that we
Mm,
could possibly carry a lot more trauma from our adolescence years into our adulthood than our prepubescent time period.
mm. Yeah, I think that we also hold trauma from every part of our
Mm,
past. You know, you were talking about the inner teenager, which I'm sure that we're going to dive a little bit deeper
yeah.
into around that. But also, you know, I'm 40 now. My inner 20-year-old, my
Mm.
inner 30-year-old, my inner 39-year-old from last year. Yet, like, there's actually our inner selves live within us like a babushka doll. You know, those
Yeah.
dolls
Oh,
that,
yeah. I like that concept, Babush Goodall.
yeah, just each layer, there's another version of me, and I grow into the next one, and I grow into the next one. But each part of us exists within inside of us as we move into the next levels, I think.
And to compound that, when I was thinking about this morning, knowing that I was going to speak to you about this, I actually, what kind of came really apparent to me was as adult women, so, we're both in our 40s, due to social media being introduced to us in our 30s, I almost feel like a lot of us are going through part of our adolescence again because what we watch our kids go through in that social comparison and keeping
Mm,
up with the Joneses and how our lives are perceived or presented, we're actually going through that as adults. So
yeah.
part of I feel, I don't know if this is universal, interaction with social media has been quite adolescent-esque.
Nice awareness. I love that. Well, it is. And I almost wonder if social media in and of itself is adolescent-esque.
Mm,
But like that is the platform for it. Like it is the how, you know, like something like a newspaper has an energy of an of a 60, 70, 80 year
yeah,
old. Like
yep.
it has elderly in it. And I don't know if that's because it's old technology, so to speak, but there's like a book. A
Mm,
book generally, even if it's a children's book, still feels like a technology that is an older being.
yeah.
Social media, particularly I'm thinking Instagram, is
Mm.
quite, and TikTok being, yeah, well, Instagram being adolescent and TikTok being childlike. Next, 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 next. You know?
Yeah, and like performative, look at me,
Yeah.
flashy. And now watching those platforms even attempt to change themselves. So for
Mm,
those of you that don't use social media for business, you may not know that the platform will push certain types of content. And right now the trend is to push educational content. So it's almost like TikTok is trying to grow up, but
yeah.
still be the cool kid. And it's so, I even find myself like, do I put a filter on? How do I look? Stuff that I would have if it had been available in my teens,
Yeah.
worried about in my adolescence. As a 44-year-old woman, still worrying about it. And how much of this is helping me heal or keeping me trapped? I don't know. Maybe a bit of both.
Yeah. Self-awareness, though, I think that if you're in that space, and that's what happens when we do, I kind of want to say inner you work, right? When we do inner you, being in a child or in a adolescent kind of work, when you do go back to being that, to meet yourself with love.
Mm.
So I shared with you off air that just last year I had some deep inner teen work that I was doing with a coach of mine. And what's really interesting is that I'm going to start somewhere else and then come to that, because when we're doing inner child work, like we can kind of sit there with our 6-year-old, we can sit there with our 5-year-old, our 8-year-old, and she's chucking a tantrum. That often happens, right? Have you ever had that where
Yeah.
your inner child chucks a tantrum? Most people without self-awareness don't realize that when they're kicking up a stink in their adult life, they're actually living out
Mm.
a part of themselves from their youth.
Yeah.
Be that a 5-year-old, a 6-year-old. I don't know if you've ever had a long-term partner and they've chucked a tantrum and you're like, you see them as a 12-year-old. You look at them, you're like, you're 12 right now.
And I think as women, we're really good at identifying that.
Yeah.
But even though I guess I would consider it highly educated in child development, I'm not good at holding the adolescent.
Yes. So that's where the stunting is going to be, because that's where you've got to go back to now, right? So I feel like our behaviors or our life level, if I would, so to speak,
Mm.
we will get stuck at whatever past us hasn't been matured yet.
Yeah.
So you watch your partner chuck a tantrum, and when they chuck a tantrum, they're 12 and you can see that they're 12. Can we look at our own self? So for me, the own self example here was that I eat uncontrollably from time to time, right? And that had been part of my childhood or part of my teenagehood, of like, I emotionally eat, and that's what caused me to put on weight in the past. And then I would starve myself and emotionally eat and starve myself. That was the yo-yo dieting of, oh, I'm fat, I'm horrible, I can't be like this, I better starve myself or go on a diet, lose weight, get praise, can't handle it, put the weight back on. And so more recently, in this last 12 months, I've worked very specifically on, I want to heal that within me.
Mm.
I want to heal the part of me that keeps emotionally eating, that keeps wanting to shove it all down, that keeps wanting to do that. Not from a I need to get skinny perspective, but from a there's a part of me that I need to redress.
Yeah.
And it turns out that she's a teenager.
So how do you do that? Like, how do you, of course we can be guided to that by someone, but what is the process, or what was your process?
Yeah, I think with all of this, the first thing is identification.
Yeah.
We have to find out, like, who and when. Like, who is this? What part of me is this? So we ask the great question, like we might do in inner child work, same kind of deal. Like, okay, this behavior, like I'm feeling into the behavior, and I just literally ask myself, what version of Luna is this? Who
Mm.
wants to come and talk right now? And it's likely that she's going to be in the shadows, because you've
Yeah.
berated and pushed her away and rejected her for a long time, especially if there's quite a bit of shame around the behavior.
Yeah.
So be patient, sit with, and not just in one sitting, it might be multiple sittings that you need just to identify her. Let her know that it's safe for her to come out,
Yeah.
and that you're not going to shame or reject her anymore, that you're going to receive her. This is why self-love's a skill. Doing that just in itself is skillful, right? You're bringing out
Yeah.
the parts of you that you have rejected. If you want to get to wholeness, we need to pull all the parts back that you've ever rejected, denied, shamed, and pushed away, bring them back into yourself so you can come into wholeness. So the first thing that I do is identify, who is she? And, for me, I discovered that, she's probably about that 12, like early high school. She's 12, 13, 14, even though the behavior probably started younger. The bingy behavior started even 14, when I first had a job, because I could buy my own food,
Yeah.
you know, and we really softened it. We called her Betty Binger.
Oh, bless her.
And oh, Betty's here.
Yeah.
Betty wants to feel out of control, and Betty's been denied. Betty's been denied a lot. So she's not only been denied in who she is, but she's been denied in the food. No, you can't have that, Betty. That's naughty, Betty. You'll get fat, Betty. That's what I would have told myself. And then Betty rebels and eats the world.
God,
So
I love that. So really identifying the inner dialogue you would have had with yourself.
that I'm probably still having, if the behavior is still there,
Yeah. Yep.
then I'm still having it. And how does Betty feel? And it's that kind of disassociation that, and I would teach everyone to do this with their feelings too. We're disassociating not in terms of compartmentalizing and pushing away, but just so you can get a different perspective. When I think I'm Betty, I'm consumed by Betty and I can't heal Betty. There needs to be a Betty and there needs to be a me, or anger and me, sadness and me. And now I can address anger, sadness, Betty, my inner child. Now I can address her and be, in a lot of ways, the caregiver, the mother, the gentle one that I want to be, that I didn't have at that age.
Yeah.
I didn't have a loving hand, a skillful hand actually. I did have a loving hand at that age with my parents, but not a skillful hand. My mother was also trying to diet her way into worth.
Yeah,
She
and I
can't,
and I think that's the key. Like when I'm thinking about what my version of this is, I just don't think I ever expressed her. Like no one knew she existed. I didn't
right,
probably even know she existed.
yeah.
My issue probably was around rejection. And it
Mm,
wasn't until my later teens, because I had a really weirdly easy breezy time.
hmm
But it wasn't until, late teens, early adulthood that I experienced rejection for the first time.
yeah.
And so, like, it wasn't as even if I was telling a caregiver or a friend that I was feeling this way because
Same. Mm,
so shameful or whatever it was, or I didn't even understand it. So it's not about, obviously, I just want to preface that it's not about our parents or what they did or didn't do.
mm-mm.
But then how do you go? So if you've identified, okay, I can see what she's feeling and what she's experiencing, and I can hear the inner dialogue. As adults, as our parents didn't have the skills,
Mm-hmm.
then is that again another layer? Like we have to learn the skill of how to parent that part of ourselves. Like, what's that next step?
What's that next step? Yeah, great question. And I get them to lead. So then, like as the parent in this role, the inverted commas parent there, if I'm parenting my Betty Binger, this is a really,
Mm.
like, if I'm parenting Benny, I don't have skill or knowledge on how to parent a 14-year-old, right? I've never
Yeah.
done that before. I don't know how to do that. People might be sitting there going, I don't know what to do. Well, I'm going to ask Betty what she needs from me.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Betty, what's going on for you? What's going to really, and then it's up to me as the adult to discern what she's asking for me, because she's like, well, I just want a jar of peanut butter.
Yeah.
Cool. I can pretty well, as a self-aware adult, go, it's not a jar of peanut butter. Cool. And what do you hope? And the question would then be, what do you hope the peanut butter will give you? If you get the jar of peanut butter, Betty, how do you want to feel beyond the peanut butter? And she'll chuck a tantrum and she'll be a teenager and man, just go away. Well, no, actually, let's keep going. I'm going to just lovingly be there with her. I'm a coach, so I do this with my clients all the
Mm.
time. So I am skilled at it. I'm not going to say just because I don't have a 14-year-old child that I don't know how to do
Yeah.
this.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I'm skilled at it, so I have learnt it. But if everyone listening at home, ask her. Like,
Mm.
ask Betty. Don't try to solve it. Don't try to fix it. Ask the part of you. Patiently be there with her and find out what's beyond the surface request of whatever the behavior is. Well, I want to, like for you with the rejection, I'm never going to fall in love again. Or, I'm never going to, I'm not pretty enough. What's beyond that? Tell me what's going on in your feelings there.
Yeah, I'm like gasping because it's you'll see that if you're watching this on YouTube, you will
Yes.
see me gasp in complete horror. um, that's it's hard, isn't it, to even think like it's ultimately for me. I'm guessing just off the top of my head, although I can't wait to explore this more with myself.
Yeah.
It's like that. It's like a fear thing, like a
Mm,
fear that, oh, maybe I'm not as worthy as what I thought I was. Maybe I'm not as attractive or as desirable as I thought I was.
mm.
And I think I internalized, oh, this is a great session, by the way. Do I
Yeah.
like, gosh, I'll need an invoice at the end of this
Great.
to pay. Do I see from that perspective, from her perspective, understanding, oh, relationships are actually just a power play of who
Mm,
likes who more or who's more valuable
mm,
in this. Because in my first relationship, he was the hard to get guy because he was so much older than me and blah blah blah. And but in that relationship, I was the high value because he was wrapped around my finger. So when I cut the cord and let him go,
mhm,
I just never assumed that I wouldn't play that power in a relationship. So for me, it's like unlearning and having my adulthood time unlearning that relationships aren't about power battles and desirability isn't about power battles. But what is
mm.
it really about? Because after that came rejection for the first time, where the person I liked didn't follow through, with their feelings and all of that kind of stuff. So, and how that plays, it has played out.
Yeah. And in that exploration, if I would there, for everyone listening and watching, you uncovered a belief.
Mm,
As we're doing that work, you'll uncover a belief. And once you've got the belief, because the belief is relationships are around power play,
mm.
right? Like who's got the power? And it's got to be about my desirability, and it's got to be about who's winning. And so cool, now we found a belief, and it's probably a core one, and we can go, well, where do I trace that back to? Whose relationship was I modeling,
Mm.
and what power play dynamics had rolled out there? And yes, it's useful to know why. It's more useful to find out how to change it.
Yeah,
So
exactly. Yeah.
at that point in time, then, I have a belief that all our beliefs are made up. So we may as well make up ones that serve us,
Yeah. So true.
right? So let's have a look at that belief. Well, is that true? Is that true that all relationships are power plays? That's where we would go into. You can find evidence for any belief, by the way,
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
right? So at that point, once we land on a belief, once we find a belief, you might need to shed tears because there's some
Mm.
emotional stuff trapped. Once we land on that belief, cool, let's explore that and dissect it and see how much truth is in there. Because again, that stock take, that's going, I've been carrying a belief from this long that you didn't even know that you had.
Mm.
And this is how it's playing out in relationships. Now you can see the path, the lineage. Cool. Now I get to decide whether or not that belief is something that I actually believe in. And if it's not anymore, then we can choose, well, what do I believe about relationships? Or what do I want to believe about relationships?
Mm.
And then speaking to the rejection piece then also lands into, well, where do I reject me? Where am I pushing myself away? Where do I, here's a doozy for you. Where am I conditionally loving myself?
Yeah. And where am I power playing myself?
Self.
Because going back to
Mhm.
your example, I mean, I don't know a woman alive that doesn't have some type of distorted relationship with their body.
Body. Uh-huh.
Um, and so it's like, for me, it's like I power play with my body. When
Yeah.
you are skinny, when you are this, you can absolutely wield your magic and get that.
Uh-huh.
When you are not, you're in no fit state, literally, to even think about you have skin in this game.
Yeah. Wow.
And so
Powerful,
it's,
huh?
yeah, it's so powerful. And it's just like those adolescent years are just, I just think that they're the forgotten landscape that really,
In the
really,
healing world. Yeah.
yeah,
Hmm.
absolutely. When you work with clients, I'm just interested generally. And when you're speaking to audiences, do you find that people are aware of their stuff in adolescence, or like, is it hard to tap into? I mean, you and I do this all the time. So for me to
Hmm.
tap into that was quite simple, not easy,
Simple. Hmm.
but it was obvious to me. So
Yep.
do you find people find it hard? Like where would people start? What is kind of the gauge of where people are at with it?
Yeah. Look, I mean, to answer the first question of, I think the general population has a severe lack of self-awareness. and I say that with the utmost
Thank
of
you,
love.
but thank you for saying that.
Yeah.
And for those of you that are listening, you internalize that for yourself and like take that on, but also remember that when you're dealing with other people.
People, absolutely. That most people are just cruising around being dictated by a blueprint that was written by no less than a 7-year-old. And look, that's not a it's not a judgment or a criticism on anyone
Mm.
else. It's literally just going, most people are cruising around fairly unconscious about any of the reasons why they do what they do.
Mm.
There, that's the vast majority honestly in my experience. And obviously people listening to this podcast, there's a level of self-awareness because you're here,
Absolutely. Yeah,
right?
absolutely. That's what I was going to say. But the fact that you're even listening to this shows that there's some type of curiosity at the very least.
Correct. Correct. So I'd say that, if someone's in my audience because they're at a festival or they have come specifically, there's going to be some level of self-awareness already, right?
Mhm.
If people who follow me on social or read my books or attend my courses or whatever, listen to my podcast, they already have a level of self-awareness. There's some level and it varies. So I have some clients to whom we can go deep fast, like you. If I was working with you, Kirsten, like I feel like the work could be done like
I'd be on the floor right now. It
with,
wouldn't be pretty.
and yeah, but within 20 minutes you'd be done, you'd be up, or you'd be giving yourself a hug and be happy about it, right? So there's the further along the line,
Mm.
the simpler, and I'm going to use your words there because simple does not mean easy, the simpler it becomes, right?
Yeah.
The more straightforward it is. I don't know if the vast majority of the population are aware of their inner child in general.
Okay.
So then I don't know if they would know the nuance of moving into different ages, i.e., you're in a teenager. I
Okay.
would,
Wow.
yeah. I mean, if you have done very little or no self-reflection work on your past, then the inner child probably hasn't been addressed as much as any of your beliefs haven't. A lot of people don't even know that they have thoughts that are destructive because they are involved in their thoughts so much that it consumes them and they can't see the forest through the trees. In terms of vast majority of population in the world, when I'm out in supermarkets and at concerts and, when I'm out in the world,
Mm.
not just in my personal development world, in the personal development world, lots of people have a fair good understanding of this, but in the general population, I'm not sure that people are doing much of this.
Yeah. Yeah. Of course. And I've even had a client say to me, she can't remember. And I know that that's a trauma response and there's so many layers to that. But I wonder often, like, do we not remember or do we not think to, or we think to forget or we don't think to remember?
Yeah. Or that it isn't significant or we dismiss it. I mean, everybody has a rough teenagehood or everybody has this, or, we just generalize our past. And look, I'm similarly, I have clients who found it very difficult to remember their childhood. And look, if you're sitting there going, I don't remember anything from it, I also don't, again, it's a belief of mine and part of my methodology. I don't think you have to know.
Yeah. Good point.
Um, if your current reality, I say this to my mum a lot. Mum's like, "Oh, I've never really gone and done that." She follows me and she's like, "I don't really ever gone and done that, like gone and done any belief work or whatever." And I said, "Look, the only time you really need to do it is if your current circumstances, your current relationships, your current level of life isn't where you want to be. If she's pretty happy and
Mm.
she's not unhappy enough in any of her parts of life that it would cause her to want to open up the can of worms.
Yeah.
They say that ignorance is bliss, right? But for seekers, you're a seeker,
Yeah.
I'm a seeker. For those of you sitting there
Yeah.
going, no, I don't want to keep Betty binging. I don't want to keep ruining my relationships. I don't want to keep just on this treadmill of my life. There's something deeper inside of me that wants to come out. When that deeper inside of you wants to come out, that's that innocence, if we would, from when we're born, that worth that has been chalked on by conditioning, layers of programming. That's when you have to start uncovering it so that this can bloom, because otherwise it's just compacted.
And would you say that the the overarching intention behind this work is to shift beliefs and perceptions in order to empower new ones to take hold?
For me or for people who do it, do you think?
Both?
Yeah, I think that when people enter the healing kind of world, like personal development or spiritual development, they just want to be out of pain.
Totally.
I think that that's, like I'm in pain and I'm looking for a solution. When I know, my clients would come to me and they come to me because they want to be out of pain. They want to feel more confident, more self-assured. Actually, they want to just not feel self-doubt. They want to stop holding themselves back. I know for myself that the deeper that I went into this work and continue to go into this work, that self-love leads you to a connection with divinity. Like to whatever you want to call that, your wholeness, if you want to call it Jesus, God, whatever you believe in, whatever your beliefs land on, universe, consciousness, it's about returning to the wholeness to which you are, source energy. That's, if I talk about intention, I don't know if people go into it with that intention, but what I've discovered is that the deeper that you go, that's the obvious path. You end up going home to you, the truth, beyond everything that you are buried under.
To conclude, can you give us an insight for you what it feels like to meet, embody, and sit in that truth?
Liberation, Kirsten. Like it's freedom. It is, the word that's coming to me is also relaxation. It's ease. I'm easeful. And it's funny, the word that's coming to mind here is current, in the sense of presence, or like I'm running with the current. And no, none of your listeners are going to know this, but just a few minutes before this podcast recording started today, I had completely forgotten that it was on. It wasn't in my personal calendar.
Dubbing herself in.
I'm dubbing myself in. I rocked up on here. I saw my email. I was like, oh my, and I was already late. I was already 7 minutes late, and I wasn't dressed for it and any of that kind of stuff. And I jumped on and said to Kirsten, I'm so sorry. Can you give me 2 minutes and I'll be ready? And Kirsten so lovingly, graciously had said to me, oh, if you want to reschedule. And I was like, no. I just need to make myself a bit more presentable. That was all. So I went and did that 2 minutes later. And Kirsten, the reason I can do that is because this is just my state of consciousness. I don't particularly need to prepare, if that makes sense. Not because it's not important, but because I'm just speaking my truth. I speak what I know. I speak from my heart. So I don't need to necessarily psych myself into something like this, because I can speak it at a drop of a hat, because I'm in the flow. And that's what it feels like to reach that place.
Love that. A client once said to me, I bet you're a really amazing one-hit wonder. Like you don't have to, like you don't go back over things that you've said or written because you're a one-hit wonder. And I don't think she meant it in any way offensively, but she was pointing out at that time perhaps how my written word in the Moon membership wasn't completely grammatically and all that correct.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
of course I took a bit of a God,
Yeah,
like I
ego.
know that's my biggest weakness. I know that. Like typo literally should be my middle name. Doesn't help that I've worked with 5-year-olds for 20 years. So I just don't know how to spell anything because I can read anything. So, but now you speaking, you know what's it's just illuminated to me. It's like, I'm not a one-hit wonder. I'm embodied.
You're
They're two
embodied.
totally different things.
And anyone, I mean, I know that we're reaching conclusion here. I recently released a free magnetic confidence guidebook. By the way, I can put a
Nice.
link. I can put a
Yes.
link in the thing. You can
I'm
use
sure
the thing.
many people will want that.
Yeah, a couple of people. One person messaged me, like, "Thank you so much for that. There's a couple of typos in it, or there's a couple of mistakes. Can I let you know it? It's a 25-page document, kind of like it's a really decent, fully beautiful document, and she said, can I give you some feedback, is what she had said.
Mm.
And I said, is the feedback around grammar or spelling, or is it about the content? And she said, it's about grammar and spelling. And I said, did you understand the message? And she said, yes. And I said, thank you, I don't need the feedback.
Mm.
Because like you, Kirsten, for me, it's like, if we are focusing so detailed on
Mm.
a spelling mistake in something that you got for free, even if you're just getting it when someone writes it on Facebook or whatever, if that's the thing you're honing in on, it's pretty likely, I can tell in your thinking, that you are criticizing and judging the crap out of everything that you're doing. If
Mm.
you're the kind of person who has to tell the person, and look, if I'm going to put it on a poster or I'm going to put it on a street sign, I'm going to need to make sure that that is accurate. But for a document of, 10,000 words, for there to be one error in it, my first book was called Perfectly Imperfect. I'm okay with it.
Yeah.
Let us deal with the fact that if you understand the message, the way that you got there doesn't matter. So,
Yeah. And like, of course that's triggers so much childhood stuff for me, but
mm,
and in a lot of ways I appreciate it, because I do want to put stuff out there that is
yeah,
whatever, correct. But
yeah,
I think I just love your explanation of this is what the work brings you. And I think my biggest observation of people is they get into the work for a particular outcome. I'm going to do the work so I get the man, the body, the wealth, whatever it is.
yeah.
Not about the outcome outside
Come.
of you. It's about who you become, and
Hmm.
to be
Amen.
embodied. I'm going to call it embodied or aligned, but you said it so much more eloquently, is a gift that nobody can take away from you. And it is the most empowering position to sit
Mm,
in.
mm.
So thank you for holding space for people
A pleasure.
to get to that point.
Yeah. Beyond the circumstances, if I would just add to
Yeah.
that, I really want to make that really clear. It doesn't mean that I get everything that I want in my life.
No,
It,
yeah.
it doesn't mean that everything happens the way that I want it to. It doesn't mean that no one gets sick or die, including myself. None of that. It's not about that. It's about what am I cultivating and learning skill within myself, so that the circumstances outside of me are no longer the thing that's dictating my happiness, but I am the one that's in charge of that. And that's true empowerment.
So beautifully said. And I hope that this chat has encouraged, for those of you that are listening, if you haven't dived into inner child work, to do that, but if you feel called to, but also to really pay attention to that inner teenager who might be running more of the show than perhaps
Yeah.
perceived to this point. Where can people find you and connect with you, and potentially, work with you and what you have to offer?
Yeah, look, you can go find me on my socials. My full name is Lunaria Gaia. You'll find me all on the socials, TikTok, YouTube. I'll drop in the link in the show notes anyway. So you can find my link tree there. There you'll be able to download your Magnetic Confidence Guidebook, the free one there. If you're interested in my book or any of my courses, it'll be the link in the bio that I've popped there, or you can just Google my name. Google my name and you'll be able to find me across the board in lots of different places.
Head to the show notes to get that link.
Mhm.
Lunaria, thank you so much for your time, sharing your wisdom, and for holding space not only for yourself, but for those around you. Thank you.
Such a pleasure. Thank you.